Hey everyone, David from SundaySounds.com here, and I'm doing a little screen capture today with some sound design info for you. I'm working on the free patch of the week that we're going to send out in this week's Insiders Update, which is our weekly digest we send out via email of all the content we've created, all the free tutorials, sound design resources, and then also some free downloads like this free patch that I'm about to work on. So if you want to sign up to get the update, you can follow the link in the description of this video or go to sundaysounds.com/updates, and you'll be able to check that out. So I'm starting from kind of from scratch here. I have this idea in my head, and I'm going to kind of describe it audibly and then sort of work on creating it here. It's sort of a layered patch, and my idea is this initial sort of pluck sound that sort of sounds sort of elastic and has maybe some delay and a really quick decay, and then another sound, sort of like a polysynth, that fades in 2 beats after it. So you'll hear like the initial note, and then this chord will sort of come in behind it that's nice and thick and sort of woolly. So I thought this would be a fun opportunity to use one of my favorite plugins that I actually don't end up using as much as I'd like, and I haven't really dug into in a little while, called Sculpture. So I've got 2 channel strips over here, and I'm just going to sort of design this patch from the ground and walk through the process as I build it, because I thought y'all might enjoy sort of a sneak peek or behind the scenes look as I'm sort of designing this patch. So I've got Sculpture open here, and this is what it looks like. And this is my default, so your default preset might not sound like this. This is a sort of a complex plugin, and it's not super intuitive at first. It can be kind of intimidating, and it doesn't have a lot of the same structures set up, at least visually, that a lot of other synths do. So it can take a little bit of time to sort of get comfortable with it, and I'm not going to dig into that in this video because that would just go way beyond the scope of purpose here. But I'm going to start to play around. Like I said, this sound that I want is going to have just a quick attack, sort of a pluck sound that sounds a little plasticky. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn this delay off. And that's what we're left with. And then the release here is really long, almost 2 seconds. So I'm going to shorten that up. Okay. And there's all sorts of things we could do here to process, but the first thing I'm going to do is just going to drag this material around. I like Sculpture because it has sort of this real physical material modeling characteristic that none of the other MainStage synths have. You can get sort of similar sounds in Alchemy, but this just nails those types of sounds. You can get some really weird sounds. And you can adjust where the pickups are. You can add some multiple objects, and they influence the character of the tone of the sound. I want that to happen at the same time. There we go. That's pretty interesting. We'll make this a low pass filter. Okay, so for the purposes of this video, got sort of an interesting sound. And I think that that's enough for us to work with to be able to sort of tweak using some of the audio effects. I'm going to make this just a little bit louder. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is throw a channel EQ on here. I'm going to hit this little lock box so that only one plugin opens at a time. And there's some unnecessary low stuff happening. And I might bump it up about here to make it a little bit bitier. Then I'm going to feed that into a compressor. For pluck sounds like this, where the attack is really tight, I like to use either the Studio FET or the classic VCA. Obviously, that adds volume, but even if we bring the volume back down, it's still adding some intensity to the initial attack. Just to compare. When you're adding effects like this, it's always helpful to try and balance your volumes, because oftentimes it's easy to interpret increased volume as better, and that's not always the case. So I try to balance those out before I really start to dig into the effect. This is really emphasizing initial attack. And just balancing those volumes out really helps you to make more objective judgments. Instead of just like, it's louder, it's most likely better, you might have a better grasp on what you're actually doing and how it's affecting your sound. Next, I'm going to diffuse this a little bit. I'm going to add a sample delay. And I like to do this on some synth sounds. Just adding a little bit of sample delay spreads out the sound. So the left has no delay and the right has 526 samples. You can do it in milliseconds too. It doesn't really matter. I just follow my ear, do it to taste. Might mess with that a little bit more later, but for now we'll just see how that works. Sorry, I'm playing this one riff over and over. I'll go. Super different. Okay, so now I'm going to add some actual delay. For pluck sounds, it can be really cool to use stereo delay. Let me set my tempo here. Don't want any lows in there. There's no lows in the original, so it would just be noise anyway. I find that the stereo delay feedback knobs are really sensitive. I'm going to bring the feedback down quite a bit. And then I'm going to crossfeed the left into the right and the right into the left. There's that riff again. And then I'm going to mess with the subdivisions here. Okay, that works okay. It's a little dry, so we're going to add in some silver reverb. It is tough to dial in a good reverb sound sometimes for really quick attack in MainStage without going to Space Designer, which is a CPU hog. But all the other reverb plugins kind of tend to add that initial sort of slap that you can hear right there, which is sometimes desirable, but I find that often it sort of adds this tail to the sound that I'm not really looking for. So we might address that in just a second, but for now we're in an okay place. One way to mitigate that is to bring down the high cut, cut off some of the highs. I'm also modulating these tails quite a bit, or trails. I think, do delays have tails and reverb has trails? Or the other way around? I'm not sure. If you know, leave a comment. Okay, so that's sounding okay. It's still maybe a little vanilla. Let's see. Let's go around and play with some of the body stuff that you can do in Sculpture, because there's really interesting models here that really impart interesting character. Ooh, I like that. pretty cool. If you can't tell, I'm literally just turning knobs and kind of poking around for this patch. And oftentimes, this is kind of how I really end up with sort of inspiration for concepts that I'll actually end up inspiring entire patch libraries or new sounds. Is I'll start by just kind of poking around and playing and turning knobs and really imagining, or trying to at least, that I sort of have physical controls in front of me that I can manipulate. Obviously, there's principles that govern a lot of these things, but when it comes down to it, you cannot beat experimentation. You cannot beat just sort of creating and then editing yourself after the fact. And that's oftentimes how I like to approach a lot of these things. For instance, this first object is an impulse response right now. We could change it to a strike. There's all sorts of different sounds. That one's no good. Okay, I think I'm going to go with. It's interesting. I dig that. It's kind of cool. It still sounds a little clean to me, so I'm going to add some distortion here. This is really subjective, especially with these really quick attack sounds. It can be easy for them to sound gnarly. So we might try a couple different flavors here. I'll bring the volume down. I want to make sure that I don't burst your eardrums here. Bring the drive up, and then I'll bring the gain back up. It's pretty interesting. Obviously, the mix control here is really affecting. Ooh, nice, C sharp. That's a great note to play when you're in the key of G. Okay, I kind of dig that with the gain up quite a bit. Sort of a tube feel to it. Definitely getting near electric guitar territory, which is kind of nice, but still distinctly a synth. And I really like the way that sample delay is diffusing this. So if I were to mess with that, you notice the difference in character. At least if you have headphones on. If you're watching this on your iPhone, then you're probably missing most of what's going on. That's okay. Still love you iPhone people. I'm guilty of watching sound design videos and demos on my iPhone too. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there, and we're going to play with this second sound here. So the idea here is I'm going to build a big polysynth, sort of like a future bass kind of deal. And then I'm going to process it with audio effects, and maybe with MIDI effects too. We'll play around with the best way to approach it so that I'm able to play something initially with this pluck synth here, and then the super saw type polysynth is going to fade in afterwards. Obviously, you could do this with, well, not obviously, maybe that's obvious to you, but you could do this with the amp envelope here with envelope 3 and ES2. But then it's not going to be responsive to to tempo changes or time signature changes. And I kind of like to make this flexible so that I can play with it at multiple tempos. So here's where we're at right now. That's a little loud. So that's not exciting. First thing we're going to do is turn on unison. Already better. Okay. And I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. I said polysynth, super saw. So that's where we're going. detuning these oscillators. Might be a little quiet now. Okay, and then by default I have my mod wheel in ES2 mapped to cutoff. We're going to set that time to flat so that it lasts forever. Okay, so there we are. Pretty basic super saw polysynth type deal. My default EQ preset is not the factory default. I have the lows and the highs kind of cut on both, but that was more high than I wanted cut because it took all the energy out of that saw deal. You know, it's kind of the signature, so all that air up top. So we're going to bring that in, bring that back in, and then a little cut here, get a little boost there, just a smidge. And we might bring that down a little bit too. There we go. All right, and then we're going to compress this guy a smidge. So we're going to go back to compressor. For big stuff like this, vintage VCA is my go-to. Okay, trying to match those volumes. Sorry, I just had to pause the video because I accidentally brought the the makeup gain like up to 50. Almost blew my own head off, and I'm not going to do that to you in the video. So, anyways. And then I might thicken this up a little bit too with some sample delay. I might. And we'll take it the other direction a little bit. It's nice. I've got the filter wide open here. So that's kind of what I want to base everything off of, and then I'll bring it back down when I get closer. Silver Verb, my go-to. If you haven't figured that out yet. Okay, that's pretty cool. So let's combine these layers. So we have an obvious volume mismatch there. So we could approach this a couple ways. Balancing stuff out is always a challenge because you want things to have energy when they're wide open, and you want things to be sort of contained when you close them back off. And sometimes it can be hard to get that transition to be smooth. Like down here, I'd say that's a pretty nice blend. As the mod wheel goes up, I feel like we're losing the synth, which I don't really like. There's some things we could do in here to sort of open up the cutoff there or increase the volume as well, but that's a little bit complex to tackle in this video, and we're already at 20 minutes, so I don't want to take too much longer to do this. So we're going to do this with a 3.3 thing. 3.3 thing is some of the new functionality that came with the MainStage 3.3 update. So my input event here, I'm using the modifier MIDI effect. This is, again, my factory, or my default preset, so it might not be yours. Anyways, first thing I'm going to disable through. You're going to want to set the input event to mod wheel. And then I'm going to go up here to the top and choose Learn Plugin Parameter. Now, the modifier plugin is listening for the next thing that I touch. Just like when you're mapping a parameter here in edit mode. I'm going to click on this guy, the level knob in Sculpture. So now it's set to Sculpture level. We're going to set add. This can be tricky because it doesn't give you a really clean measure of scale. So one way to actually tell is to open up the plugin, and you can see this is nice because it actually moves it. That's better. A lot of reverb on that guy. So we're going to turn the mix down, make that a little bit. That's a little less time. Okay, so now remember at the beginning of the video, and I'm wrapping up here, is the idea that I had was sort of this sound is what was initially heard, and then this sort of fades in afterwards. And I have not rehearsed this. I've got a few ideas about how we could approach this. One idea I had was to use this guy, the modulator, to modulate volume. But that's not, I don't think this is going to do what I want, because I'm looking for something that's going to hold indefinitely, and that's not going to do it. Like I said, we're just trying stuff out. I haven't done a sound like this in a while that has like a fade that actually allows you to adjust tempo and have it still work. So a couple other ways I've got ideas of doing this. Let's see here. I'm going to go into Filter and choose Auto Filter. What I'm looking for here is something that's just going to give me that slow rise in attack. This isn't getting me there either. It's okay. Still figuring this out. So the other idea that I had, like I said, I haven't really rehearsed this. I just sort of have the idea in my head, and now I'm sort of problem solving to figure out how I can execute it. Oh, I might be able to do it this way too. Let's see. Note repeater. Yeah, this will get me there. Okay, we're gonna do it try it with note repeater here. Shut off delay designer. I'm gonna disable through, and I want a single repeat. One, just one. And then I'm gonna set this to half note. There. And then I'm gonna adjust the attack time here. There we go. Sort of doing what I want. And then, ooh, what is this velocity ramp? That's interesting. Never noticed that before. Okay, yeah, so this is kind of where I'm at here. That's interesting. I don't know if I love that. It's not like I had it in my head. That's sort of fun. I think this is a pretty cool little patch. Um, Definitely interesting. I can't get on board with this note repeater deal. It's not working. It's okay. Sometimes the ideas you have in your head don't execute 100%. I think I just like it with. I think that's really cool. Adjust the envelope here a little bit more. I want to make this a little bit more pad-like. Pretty cool. It definitely got this electric guitar vibe, which I really like because the stock electric guitars in MainStage are not great. And I almost rather like fill the space rather than nail the sound when I'm mimicking other instruments. I kind of prefer to like play synth brass if I'm missing brass in an arrangement than like try and sound exactly like brass. Same thing sort of goes with the guitar. I'd rather sort of fill the same sonic space and not try to sound exactly like the instrument, because it's really hard to nail that. But if you sort of fill the same space and still sound uniquely like a synth, then I think you can get away with it a lot more easily. All right, well, I think I'm going to call this patch good. So things that you could do if you wanted to make this patch flexible, you could disable modifier if you didn't want that volume modification. You could open up Sculpture and play around with the different object types, play around with the pickups, play around with the material, all sorts of things in there. One thing that you could do right away to make this really interesting is to open up Silver Verb and mess with the wet dry. That can give you all sorts of sounds. If you have more wet and less dry, you can layer that underneath pads and stuff in more subtle ways. And then with the ES2 synth, you can play around with the balance of the oscillators, play around with the detuning of the oscillators. You can play around with the waveforms. So going to square, give you all sorts of different sounds. You could play around with the effects here. Play around with frequency modulation, with the resonance, with the filters. There's all sorts of things you can do. Those are a couple places that you could start if you wanted to sort of use this patch as a jumping off point for your own sound design. Man, all right, 31 minutes, well, 30 minutes into this video. I hope that some of you stuck through and watched and that it was helpful. If it was, please give it a like or leave a comment depending on where you're watching. And then share it with a friend of yours that's using MainStage or Logic Pro and doing sound design. It really helps us out when you folks who follow us spread the word with your musician friends, because it means we can do more video content like this. Your support makes it possible for us to give away these free resources. So thank you for being here, for watching this video. And if you want to get the free patch of the week every week and all of the tutorials and resources that we are producing and giving away for free, then make sure that you sign up at sundaysounds.com/updates, and then you'll get the Insiders update in your email inbox every Wednesday. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. We will talk to you soon.